My name is Audrey Cutler. I'm here with Dominique Swan, Facet's new instructional designer, a wonderful colleague, as well as Mary Slade and Kelly Kraft that are moderating today. We're focused on rebuilding your course 1 week at a time in this session, where we're just going to go over some basic guidelines, uh, uh, suggest a model for building your course in this way, and then give you a demonstration of how this actually looks in Blackboard and examples of how you can do this within your own course. Our main guidelines and focus here are to help you get organized and be consistent in your communication with students and your organization of materials. The first guideline is really keep it simple. You're already just trying to get through the material of this semester, and what's great for both you and students is simple is better. We're going to show you a few models of consistent organization. You don't have to follow this exactly, but whatever you do, ensure that each week is constructed in a similar manner. It'll minimize the amount of confusion and navigating the students have to do to get through your content. In the same vein, some of our faculty members have asked their students what they'd like as due dates for their course this semester. When you're thinking in grouping content into a week for online courses, even though your course may generally meet 3 times a week, you can choose to bring that number of deadlines down for your students to once or twice a week. Having those consistent each week, again, is going to help students schedule and stay focused. We're pushing asynchronous instruction. Mainly, we're currently in a synchronous environment for this session. We know that there's going to be a variety of challenges students and the faculty will in terms of technology availability and access to the internet. Asynchronous instruction means that each week there'll be due dates, deadlines, but students can complete whatever they need to complete up until that deadline. So they don't have to be in the same exact time and online at the same time as everyone else. If you do recorded sessions, sorry, my apologies. If you do synchronous sessions like this one, ensure that you record them so that you can make those available to students that were unable to attend. And you can do that in any of our tools that you use for synchronous communication. It's time to see who's missing. I added this for today. What's helpful when you have things due each week is you can see where students are. You're going to want to check in with them and make sure they're on target. So if you find that students are not responding to you or have not posted an assignment, please communicate with them quickly. You can start by email. If needed, you can give them a call and get in touch with them. We've gotten some guidance down from the provost too that if you find that a student has dropped out, not officially dropped out, but is not participating and is not contacting you, to let your chair know, because they can do some coordinating to see if that student is just missing from all of their classes and take a more holistic approach to that. And of course, more than ever, being flexible. You are, as I mentioned, going to have students with various levels of tech and with a whole bunch of responsibilities they may not have had to deal with before. And they may be sharing technology. They may be working in different ways or doing daycare for someone who is working outside of the home. So please keep all that in mind and be flexible with individual students. The model that we'll show you today that you can take what works for you is based on a course shell that we have that we call the gold template. And what we've got in this template is we've customized the menu on the left. You can do that within your own course. You can rename it, add different sections. And we have within each week, which is in a separate folder, these different elements. An overview, a to-do list with lines, objectives for that section, any instructional content, which could be links to readings within Cook Libraries databases. It could be links to readings and websites, for example. It could be PowerPoint presentations with notes. It could be links to outside videos, for example, on YouTube or in Cook's databases. It could also be links to videos that you create, for example, in Pano to add to for your students' instructional viewing. Then opportunities for activities, projects, assignments, and I added here guided practice, so opportunities for feedback, opportunities also for collaboration, there's a space for that, and the assessments for that week, and then a way to wrap it up. And the overview also, we're bringing in what they've done before at the top and then tying it into what they're working on next. I'm gonna, in the chat, I'm gonna give you a link to our sample weekly layout handout so that you can take a look at that. It's a Word document. And now I'm going to show you a little bit more about what this actually looks like in Blackboard. So if you need to zoom in, you can do so again on the upper left using the show view controls. So if you look on the menu part here, you'll notice that we've customized it. You don't have to get this fancy, but we've got a place for syllabus and schedule, and we've added a content area called learning modules. And also another one for major assignments. Within that page, weekly modules for you. It could be the content page that you're already using. We'd have a folder for each week, and then within each week, this is what that might look like. A very brief overview, very, very brief and easy to read to-do list with due dates, and the to-do list can include anything that they're viewing and watching, as well as actual things that they have to submit in some way. And then spaces for the materials, and below that, assessments and assignments. I'm going to pass this over to my colleague Dominique. She's going to go through one of her actual courses set up using these guidelines, and we'll do a demo.
Thanks again, Audrey. My name is Dominique Swan. I am the new instructional designer at Facet. Good morning. Thanks for joining us. What I will be talking about is sort of my design approach to how I took a face-to-face lesson and moved it online. And then I'm actually going to walk you through the process of how I built that in Blackboard. And just to get us started, I wanted to focus a little bit on my teaching strategy and course background, just to give you a context of what I've been doing. So prior to joining Towson, I've been working as an English composition instructor at George Mason University in Fairfax, Virginia. And I typically teach English 302, which is advanced composition. So it's for junior or senior level students who will be soon graduating and going off into their fields. And then our goal in 302 is to introduce them to the types of writing that is expected of them once they are working in the field, wherever they might be. So that's like our broad goal, okay? And then in terms of where we are in the course, prior to things moving online, we had finished up a project, and it was called the Discipline Project. And the goal of that project is to get students to go and find a journal article and then rewrite that or translate it into something that is meant for a public or popular audience. So taking something scholarly and then turning that into something that is easy to understand for a general audience. And so that's what we've done. And our next step, of course, is to move on to academic writing. So this will be more along the lines of a literature review. So that's going to be sort of our main event, what we're working towards, and getting them acclimated with academic conventions, how to do that type of work. So prior to us moving online, we had began talking about literature reviews. I had them complete an exploratory activity where they had to go online and use Google to find a sample of a literature review, and they did this in groups, and then they talked about things that they noticed, and it's really just talking about stylistic conventions and things like that. And we just briefly talked about it, but our goal the following class was to actually break down different opinions about how to approach writing a literature review. However, we got moved to online. And so I had intended to do this entire lesson, but it had to be moved online. So I'm going to show you a few things and talk about my design process, how I sort of, I had an idea in mind, but it wasn't going to work because we weren't going to be together. And so I decided to make that up or at least for that in my online design. So just to give you an idea, this is my desktop. I'm using a Mac just in case this looks a bit different to you. So I'm showing you just a screenshot of my schedule. So what I wanted them to do this following class post spring break when we were supposed to return was read this web page, and it's called Learn How to Write a Review of Literature. And then I wanted them to really focus on writing the introduction, because the next class after that, we would talk about the intro and they would have a chance to try writing one. And I was also going to give a lecture as well. So they would come in, I give the lecture, and then we talk about this reading, and then we sort of make a connection to what we talked about last class, which means, hey, remember we explored this thing, and then now we have this person who's sort of setting up the conventions for us. What do we do with that, and how do we sort of use that to form in our mind what a literature review looks like? And then from there, we were going to take a look at another sample, and I was going to have them create like a web or some kind of concept map to capture the organization of the literature review. And so we were going to do that together. We were going to discuss and then talk about how people's organization looks the same, how they look different, what do we do with that information, and then they would go on to learn more about lit review introductions. So we weren't able to do that, but I had a unique opportunity to basically work with every student on their understanding organization. So I'm going to show you how I did that. So I'll close this out. So on my desktop, I have a folder dedicated to materials. And if you are ever, if you're needing a more efficient way to go from housing your content on Blackboard to having your own set of documents, you can always create a folder on your desktop that houses your documents. That means that you have a copy of everything that you want to put into Blackboard. So that's what just works for me, keeping everything in one place, because you do want to be as efficient as you can, all things considered. So let me show you what I decided to do. Even though we weren't able to work in groups and have a discussion, we were able to make some of these things up with an individual assignment. So I decided that I was going to have them do it, but they would do it solo. And I put together this instruction sheet of how to do. So first step is they have to find a journal article or an academic book that has a literature review. So that's again like skill application. Can you find the thing that we talked about? Can you identify it? And then the other thing that I did was I gave them samples. I always tell people, if you feel like your particular week when you're planning has a lot of materials in it, you could always try and push some of the nice to haves, but not necessary right now. You can push those into assignments and have students look at it from there. And then the other thing that I did was I decided to give them a citation. They're working on understanding citations as well as they learn about academic writing. And so this one they don't have to work for, right? This sample they don't have to work for, but this one they will work on trying to find that to give a variation of types of literature review samples. So once they do that, then they have to create something for me. And this is the part where I really liked what I tried to do, because it gives it options to the students, it gives choice. So as we know, some students might not have as much access to certain technologies at this time. And so they can do this concept map by hand and take a picture of it with their phones, or they can create something on their computers or whatever sort of tool feels most comfortable for them. I only care about getting the actual visual product at the end. Okay. And then, so giving them choice is a great way to make sure that everybody can be included on this. And they're still going through sort of the same sort of skill set of seeing how organization works in a literature review. And then after that, even when they have created something visually, I do want them to follow up with a reflection so that they can think about how what we talked about in class or what they're reading in the content applies to what they just did for this assignment. So I walked them through those steps of making the connections, and I built out questions here to help them draw some conclusions about conventions and then how those conventions are applied or not applied in an academic paper or a book. So that's how I try to make up for that. And then the good thing about Blackboard is that I was able to capture the essence of a discussion, but now they will have to type up their responses versus actually just communicate one-on-one orally. And so those were the two ways that I was able to move it online. So let me show you how I actually built that out to make it accessible to students. Before I do that, do we have any questions or anything before I move on?
I have a question. This is Don. Um,
Mhm.
how do you grade things like this?
So I have a short assignment rubric, right? And so every time I assign something like this, so it could be a concept map, it could be an outline, it could be, I don't know. One time we made advertisements because they were learning about the art of persuasion. So those things are like 15 pointers or 20 pointer assignments. And it's a breakdown. Either they met the expectations, went above and beyond the expectations, or it needs improvement. And so it's really quick to grade. And so they get plenty of feedback from me on the go. I don't put a lot of time into these types of assignments in terms of like the comments, just because they're assigned every other week, if not weekly. So does that, and I'm happy to share examples of short rubrics. I think we can probably post that in the community site for everybody. Does that help answer your question?
Yeah, that's fine. Thank
Okay. So let's go ahead and move into how I built this out so that it looks consistent and it looks organized and it tells, sort of a story to the student. One of the things that has really helped me is actually having notes of my lessons on the computer that I then copy and paste into Blackboard. So I like to work off of Blackboard to have just an outline of what I want to do. And so I call this my capture sheet. You can call it your notes, but essentially, this is where I put all of the content that I will then post to Blackboard. And it's broken down by the categories that Audrey mentioned from before. So as you can see here, I have a space for outcomes, introduction, to-dos, readings, the discussion board, and then finally a summary. And so those are all of the main components. So for every week, there's a grab bag that will contain these essential items that you want. And so I just typed everything up in here. And the good thing about it is that I always can sort of plan on the go. If I don't have internet access, I can still type into this document, and I always have my notes with me wherever I go. And it has saved me time, but your process might be different. Some people prefer to work directly in Blackboard, and that's totally fine. Just know that Blackboard doesn't automatically save a lot of content. And so if you're in the middle of typing something that's longer and you lose a connection, you may or may not lose it. So just keep that in mind as you're planning. All right, so let's go ahead and move over to Blackboard. So here we are at Blackboard. This is the finished module. So this is what we're aspiring to, what we're working towards. All right. So a few weeks ago for my face-to-face course that I'm teaching, it looked a lot like this. All right. So we have this thing called the content area. So I got here by clicking on content, and the content area is meant for your instructional materials, right? The things that you will give to your students. For me, a way to think about this is that your content link will be the equivalent of a huge file cabinet of your lessons or your modules or your units, whatever you call it in your class. These are the materials that you would want to give to your students. Okay. All right. So as you can see, we don't have anything in our file cabinet here, our content area, and we need to create one. So to do that, all you need to do is click on or select or highlight, I guess, the build content area. And then from there, we'll scroll over to new page and then content folder. And then we will click on it. All right, so this folder will be where we put the materials for 1 week. All right, so remember, for my week, we're working on literature reviews, right? So I need to title my folder something. I need to be able to make it descriptive so that students know when they go to the content area, these are the materials for this particular unit. All right, so for this one, it would be literature reviews. I will type week 7 and then literature reviews, and then I will put the week. All right, so maybe we'll put like April 1st to April 7th or however long your module might be. Okay. Now on Blackboard, underneath this, we have text. So this will show any sort of text that you input to the students alongside your name for the folder. What I'm going to do is go back to my capture sheet or my notes and look at what I put here. All right, I tend to put my outcomes here and just like a general hello or welcome message. All right, so I'm going to copy this, select and copy it, and I'll go back to Blackboard, and then I will paste it there. And so we have it. And as you can see, it looks okay, but there might be some formatting issues. So I just want to take a second to address this. As you copy things into Blackboard, you might have noticed that it sometimes changes the formatting, but you can fix that relatively quickly. Recommendations on this are just highlighting whatever text you input and then clicking this sort of eraser. And this is the remove formatting button. So I click that and then it just puts it in all the same fonts, same sizing and everything, basic text. However, we did lose a couple of elements. I don't have any bullet points now. So I just want to go ahead and add those back in, just like so. And now this looks more consistent. We have consistent font. And when you have the time to do this, I think that you should, just for consistency's sake and to make sure that there isn't something appearing on the page that is confusing to students. All right, so we have sort of our little welcome message and our outcomes. We're doing good. And then after that, we have some options. So the standard options include an option for if you want students to be able to see the content. We do, but let's say if you wanted to make a draft of something and you're not quite ready. So for my who like to work directly in Blackboard, you can always click no until you're ready. All right, and then you click yes. Then we have this thing called the track number of views, and this will give you data or analytics, figures, numbers on how students are accessing the course. So if you are wondering, are they looking at this? Are they reading this? Have they glanced at this? You can have access to that information by clicking yes here. I always say probably click it for content folders, because if you notice you're approaching midweek for a particular unit and you have low numbers, you want to send out a reminder email to students about, hey, there's a lot of content for this week, just encouraging them and motivating them to start sooner rather than later. And then the other thing that you have an option for is if how long you want content to appear. So let's say I didn't want this particular folder to be available after, I don't know, April 30th. I could set that restriction using these options here. I want all my content to be displayed, so I'm just going to leave that alone. And typically this is my default setting for posting content in Blackboard. All right, so I have my settings. From there, I will click submit. And now we have one file in our file cabinet. All right, so we're going to click on this link because in the file we don't have any things there. We want to populate it with some good content. All right, so I need to figure out a way to do that. So as you see, or as we've been talking about, there's a grab bag of certain things that you want to have. And the reason for that is to keep it organized so that you tell like a story, right? You're going to start from A and work your way up. All right, or start from one and then work your way up. So I want to begin my story with giving students sort of an overview. And so I think I might go ahead and create an item. All right, so I'm going back to that build content, and under create here, I'll click on item. And then it wants us to name the item. All right, so my goal is to really put like an opening message here. Okay, so if we go back here, this is where my introduction notes are. And I'm going to copy, well, I'll wait to copy that, but this is what we want to do. So welcome back at a lovely break. Here's what we're going to do this week. Here are your goals. Little announcements are also good for this part too. Okay, so I'm going to type introduction, all right, or you can type overview, whatever is comfortable. And then I'll go back to my notes, and then I'll highlight what I want to appear, and I will drop it into the text box, and I'll look at the formatting. It looks fine. I'll just do remove formatting just in case to be consistent. If there are extra gaps or spaces, you can clean that up relatively quickly. All right, so we have our information that will be shown to the students right when they first access this module or the content for this week. Now, the good thing about create items is that you can also add attachments and you can drag and drop. We'll use that feature later, but just know that it's there. So there are files that you wanted to put for your introduction, or like, I don't know, some kind of pre-reading or brainstorming or warm-up sort of thing. You can drop that in here. And then we have the same sort of options from the previous content that we built. And I'm going to keep the settings just the same. All right, and so we will click submit. And now we have our introduction. So right as students click on, and we'll just go back for a second. Right when students click on this folder, this is the first thing that they will see. Okay. So now once we have our introduction, our next thing is to tell them what they are to do. All right. So this is great for just like a blanket, not a blanket, but an overview or a list, just a list or a checklist of what they can expect to turn into you, right? This is good for deliverables. And even though you have these things in schedules and you put them in announcements and you posted them in Grade Center, it's always good to just reiterate, here are the 3 things or the 4 things or the 2 things I need from you this week. So let's create that to-do list. And we're going to go back to items. So if you have text that you want to share, the easiest way to do that would be from the item tool here. Okay, so I'm just going to type as our name the to-dos. I will go back to my notes, and then I will paste that here. We may have some formatting issues, but just to keep things consistent and with the same font, we'll post something like that. Okay. All right, and those are the things that they have to do. So with the to-dos, you can type in your due date so that they know, yes, you're turning this in, and they can see at a glance on what days it's supposed to be due. All right, and we'll skip attachments for now, and our options will be the same. We'll click submit. All right, so now they know what to do. And after that, I need to give them some materials. All right, so let's go to build content again. And what we're going to do is, let's see what kind of resource we're looking at. So sometimes it will be based on what kind of resource it is you want to give to them. So the first reading is an external link. So I think I will use the create link feature. So you can do that by going to build content, and then you'll scroll down to web link. All right, and then from there you need to put a name. All right, I tend to put whatever the name of the web page is. So let's go back here and grab a few things. So I will grab this. This is what will display to the students. It will show them exactly what it is they're about to click on. And then we need to grab our hyperlink. So I'll just left click here, and then I'll copy our hyperlink, and then I'm going to paste that here. All right, so it's looking good. You do not need to select the tool provider. And then you can input a description. So because this is the first reading for the week, I wanted to set the context. So I typed in a couple of notes, just a brief description on what they can expect and how it might connect, or things that they can think about as going through the source. And we have some formatting that we can clean up here. And then I'm going to take some of these things out. All right, so it's looking good, looking good. And I don't have any attachments. I tend to put open in a new window. So this web link option basically means when students click on the link, will it open a new window for them, or will it open in what they're currently looking at? I tend to like them to have multiple windows open so that they can compare notes or work at the same time that they're looking at some of the notes. So I just keep that as yes. You can whatever's most comfortable for you and the students. And then from there, I will click submit. Okay. So we have our to-dos and we have our link. It looks like we have some formatting that we might want to clean. Sometimes you do have to go back, but you do have a preview of that show you what it will look like to the students at least. All right, so we were able to do that pretty quickly. So from there, I need to add one file. All right, so from there, I'm going to go to File, and let's see. We're going to go to Browse My, well, first we need a name. All right, so we'll put Literature Review, Lecture Notes, or whatever title works best for you. And then we need to find that file. Okay, so I'll go to Browse My Computer, and then we will go to, let's see, the PowerPoint. Okay, see, let me find it 1 second. Okay, it looks like I'm missing my file here. I'm so sorry about that. Let me go back. Actually, let's go ahead and just pick this. In the interest of saving time, we'll just pick this. All right, so we'll pretend that these are my literature review notes. All right, so we'll select that file. It will input it into Blackboard. And then next you have to figure out if it will open in a new window or not. I'll put yes. I don't need to add alignment to content. I'm just going to leave that alone. It's still going to display for the students, and my options will still be the same. And then from there, I will click submit. And now they have the link and they have the file. And so we're almost halfway, well, over halfway there. Okay. And so now we have to figure out, okay, now that they have the readings, what are they going to do with those readings? So I am going to create an assignment now. All right. So remember that assignment from before, we need to figure out a way to put that in. So I will go to assessments, and then I will click on assignment. Okay. So we're creating an assignment in our folder. So I'll put here literature review concept map. And then I like to put the due date so that, again, just as many times as you can display the information as possible, I'm sure they will appreciate it. And so we'll just make up a due date. All right. So due 4/3 is the literature review concept map. And then we need to make sure they have the instructions. All right. Some people prefer to type their instructions in the text box. Other people prefer to put it as a PDF or a Word doc. That's fine. If you do attach a file, you might want to put in the instructions, see attached file for directions, and then that way they know to look for a file and are not thinking that they just don't have the instructions. Once we have that, then we need to attach those instructions. I'm going to go back to my materials here. And then I'm going to grab the instructions and then I can drop them in. So before, when we added a file, we just click browse my computer and then we selected the file, but you do have the option of dragging and dropping your files, which is pretty easy to do. You just need to have it readily available in front of you. Not every single not every single tool has this option, but a lot of them do. So for example, of course, assignment and also the item area has that as well. And then after that, it gives us a due date. So I'll just customize this. We'll say 4/3, and then we'll say 11:59 p.m. And then add our point totals. I'm just going to put 100 just to put that there. And then we have some more options. So how do you want the students to turn in their work? That's what this feature is about. So do you want them to turn in a item just as an individual, right? So it's just a solo assignment, or do you want a group submission, meaning one person is responsible for turning in the work for the group, or a portfolio submission where you can up multiple things as part of like a docket. And this is a solo assignment, so we will keep individual submission. And then you have to select, well, how many number of times can they upload their assignment? That's all number of attempts means. And so if you click single attempt, they have one time, it's a one shot to upload the file. However, if they make a mistake, then they have already used their one attempt. So I tend to either do multiple attempts or unlimited, and that way if something happens, I don't have a flood of emails about, hey, I need to turn this in, but I can't. But you do what works best for you. That's what has worked pretty well for me. And then let's say that they upload 3 different files and the third one is the right one. I usually grade the last graded attempt unless they send me an email and say it's actually the second one or the first one or whatever they have. And from there, I run Safe Assign. So this plagiarism tool is Safe Assign, and it will help scan documents to see where they're getting, if they're copying and pasting information from the internet or using previous assignments from other classes, or if they're using something from a student who took my class before. So I usually keep this on just in case, because those things do happen. And grading options. Here, I don't need to click anything, but just for the sake of you knowing what they are, if you want to take a try at anonymous grading, meaning you don't want to be able to see the names, you just want to grade blindly, you can do that here. And then the other thing is delegated grading. I don't have a TA or someone who's helping me grade, so I just leave those 2 options alone. But if they apply to you, definitely check them. And then this option is display of grades. How do I want this to appear in the grade book, or also known as the grade center? So do you want this to count? And if it counts, is it going to count in your main sort of your running total for the grading center? And do you want the students to be able to see the assignment? All right. And lastly, if you want the students to know their averages of how well people did on the assignments. So I'm going to include it and I'm going to show it to students. And then the next set of options include if I want the students to be able to do that assignment right now. Is the assignment available to them right now? Yes, I do want it to be. But let's say you're sort of working in Blackboard and trying to get ahead on, the next couple of weeks. You can always limit the availability to have it show when you want to. And then, of course, we always have the track number of views. You can turn it on, turn it off. Doesn't matter. Well, it matters to you if it matters to you, I should say. I'm sorry. All right, so we have introduction, we have to-dos, we have learn how to write a review of literature, we have the notes, and we also have the assignment. And the last thing to be here would be our discussion board. All right, so I am going to build that out, and I'm going to do that by going to build content here, and then I will scroll down to course link. All right, and I'll explain why. So over here, we already have a discussions tab. So what I want to do is communicate to the students that we're doing a discussion this week. and I need to indicate the specific instructions for that discussion. By creating a course link, what it does is it will take students directly here. And it will also help show them, or it will also show in another place what they're expected to do. Okay, so anytime you want to link to another part of your course, you can do that by going to course links. So I'm going to go ahead and browse, and I need to choose where I want to take them. So this pop-up is just a list of the items in your course that you can link to. So I'm going to take them to discussions because remember, we are creating a discussion board post. All right. So take them to discussions. All right. And then I want this particular item that shows to students in this folder. I want it to show discussion, and then we can say do. I don't know. We'll just put in some fillers here. So 4143 or whatever it is, I usually have 2 dates. One date is for posting on the discussion forum, and then the second date is for commenting. And so that gives them a chance to not just only write up, so respond to what you're asking them to do, but to then stop, think about it, and then respond to what other people had to say. So if you think that your students might be juggling a lot with trying to manage posts and comments at the same time, you could try this. So moving on, we need to communicate what they're going to be talking about in the discussion. So I'm going to go back to my notes, and I created this. And so what they have to do here is essentially look at another link. They look at another link, which is here, and then they have to talk about, in the link, it talks about literature review criteria, so the best rules for writing a literature review. And then their commentary on the discussion board, they will have to talk about those rules and how those rules apply to them or not apply to them. All right, so I just copied this over from my sheet, my notes, and then I put it into Blackboard. So as I said, look at a new resource. So I love including something new for them to look at in discussion boards just to switch it up. It's a great place to add extra resources that are nice to have, but maybe you couldn't fit it into the required reading for that week. As we can see, we have 2 different fonts we're working with, but we can clean that up relatively quick by using our trusty remove formatting tool. And then we'll sort of move things up here, make some minor adjustments. All right, and as we see, we lost some of my numerical list here, and we just want to put that back. So these are the 3 questions that will be asked, or the 3 questions that they will answer after they get this resource. Okay, so that's looking all right. And we will then save this information. All right, and same settings as before. Move this over. And then we'll click submit. And let's see what we get. We might have to go back, but that's okay. All right, so when students click on this, that it will take them to the discussion area. But before they get there, they will still see the instructions, and you can also post those same instructions right on the discussion board as well. So as we see, we populated this folder with a lot of good contents, and the only thing that we would have left to do is to add our summary, which we could do really fast. All right. So again, if you're going to input some text or some instructions, the only thing that you need to do is try and create an item. It gives a lot of flexibility for inputting text. All right. So we'll just type in summary or conclusion, and we'll go back to our notes, and we'll grab and go. And we will paste it in our text box, and for good measure, remove the formatting. And if we had, let's say you had some kind of like exit ticket or like questions you wanted them to consider ahead of next week, you could totally put those things in here and then just tell them about it. A little activity could be good here, just things to help them prepare or at least wind down from what they've done this week and then move them into what's happening for the next one. And then we'll have the same same options, default options as before, and we will click submit. And now we have a complete module for the students. And lastly, I'll say if you go into student preview, you'll have a chance to look at some of these items built out. Okay. All right. So as we said, we have all of our contents for the week from beginning to middle to end. And with that, I'm going to stop here, and I would love to take some questions if you have them, and just general discussion on how it's been going and how you're trying to build out your course 1 week at a time. Thank you.